I'm Brian Douglas, program director at Entercom. So tell me, how do you got started in the business?
I had wanted to do this since I was a little kid.
Okay.
When I was 8 years old, I think right about there, I began to really be fascinated by radio.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a long time ago, you know. But my aunt, she shared a radio at my grandmother's house with me when I had nothing to do. I was just a kid hanging around, and my cousin and my sisters were there, and they were girls, and I'd want to hang around with them. And she said, "Why don't you take this radio out?" And let's do it on the porch.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did, and got into a radio station down in Florida.
Okay.
And got to really becoming more and more fascinated with radio. And by the time when I was 9, I think, or 10, my dad took me to a radio station.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just fascinated by the whole thing, you know, the tubes glowing and the lights and the guy moving around and punching buttons and all this. And when we left, I told him, that's what I'm going to do, you know. And I guess I was about 10 at that point. But I never really got started in radio at all until I was in my mid-20s, which is pretty late. A lot of people, especially back in that day, started at least part-time in their late teens.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, and I finally realized, this is not an exciting story, but I finally realized, you know, I didn't know anybody that started any later than I had.
Mm-hmm.
I was right then.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to fear I'd never get into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called around to some small radio stations there in the area where I lived, and just, you know, I really had to press, but one of the guys finally gave me a chance. And so I got on the air doing part-time and worked that for a while. And after about a year, it was a small station, and they didn't, you know, it wasn't extremely demanding to get in there and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, after I think about a year and a half, I worked up to being the program director. I became music director and later the program director. And so really that's just been it. Since that time, I've been a program director at the various stations I worked at, and you know, it's something I really, really enjoy doing. That's really it.
So you enjoy doing program director better than doing well work?
Yeah, I do. I didn't realize when I was a kid that that's what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back on it, that's already where I was going. I was making up music lists, and I was writing up schedules and flow clocks on how the music could play and all this kind of stuff. I didn't realize, you know, that was not what everybody was fascinated with.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also into being on the air.
Mm-hmm.
But after a while, I realized, you know, that's something that I was excited about, but, you know, not every day on and on, hour after hour.
Mm-hmm.
I like doing it,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't like doing it all the time. And once you become a program director and start to do that, it becomes distracting to you being on the air. There are several people that are program directors and do a really good air shift like Morning Drive or something really demanding.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm impressed with those guys because I don't know how they manage to keep that complete focus on both. That's
Mm-hmm.
hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I realized, you know, after a while programming that I was not growing on air the way I had been before,
Mm-hmm.
and that it wasn't as fascinating to, you know.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about a day-to-day operation as far as the program director goes.
Yeah, you know, I have two positions here. I'm program director of jams, which I've now been doing for 22 years, for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I'm operations manager for the group of stations here, meaning I'm in charge of programming for all the stations.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we have 6 stations in the building. So really my job's a little different than program director would have been all by itself because I'm interacting with the other stations.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, the program director is designing the sound of the radio station.
Mm-hmm.
And just doing that sounds like it'd take about 5 minutes a day. But I know it does because I can see why it would. I find if I'm away from it on vacation or something, I think, why does this take me so much time? Why is this so complicated?
Mm-hmm.
But that's exactly it. It becomes complicated doing it. It's sort of like you might think at the house, you know, well, I've only got 3 things I need to do today. I need to go to the store and get so-and-so, and I need to drive across town and find a pair of shoes, and I need to, maybe you got 3 things to do. And you look back and it took 5 hours or 6 hours because it really ended up, there was, you know, you got there and they didn't have the shoes you needed. It's sort of the same way with this. the different air personalities are on at different times of the day, so everybody's not all here at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to talk to Big Mo, well, he worked midnight to 6, and I'm not going to be able to reach him till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon because he's got to go home and go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And Waleed does nights and then does some work late at night, putting together what we call imaging, the promo announcements that run on the air. He works on that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So to reach Waleed, sort of the same thing. He's usually up by 2 o'clock, sometimes 1 o'clock, sometimes noon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, there's a time constraints on reaching him too. The Wild Out, they're here, by 5 o'clock in the morning. They get off at 10, and then they've got some work they have to do. So meeting with them only can happen at a certain time too. So conveying everything to everybody about what we're trying to do right now, what contesting we've got going on, or how we want to talk about what we're doing for Christmas or whatever. All of it requires meeting with people at different times. And then there are also a lot of things that go on in programming that are interaction things. The sales department's responsible for selling the commercials. That's their whole job.
Mm-hmm.
And there are interactions we would have with them. For instance, let's say there was a particular client was doing a club night and he had 2 chains coming in or something like that. Mm-hmm. And the promoter, the club owner, or the guy who's booking that particular night at the club might hope we would give away some tickets to the 2 chains thing. Well, that sounds great. The audience would be into that. So we would try to work out how many of those we were going to do, when we were going to do them, mm-hmm. and we know, like next week or here in a day or so, we got the MMG tour coming. Mm-hmm. And same thing with that. We would discuss with the promoter how many tickets we could get, and are we going to do anything else? Will our announcers be on stage introducing the act? Will we do anything backstage? Are we going to give away backstage passes? Mm-hmm. Where will we be set up when people come into the venue? Where will the vans be? And all this. There are all these details in terms of how we're going to do all kind of things that aren't just on the air that the program director's involved in too. Mm-hmm. And so, working all that out is part of it, but basically just designing the radio station, making sure the music is the way it's supposed to be, and sounding just right. It maybe sounds, the station might be a little more intense. Hey, Horace, I'll be through in just a few minutes. Okay. All right. There might be for instance, the station's probably going to sound a little more intense musically at night than it does, say, at 10 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. People are a little more laid back there at work and all that. So, we put all that together, how that'll be, which songs we're going to play, what we're not going to play, how that'll all be put together. And like I say, the promos and promotional announcements, you hear that stuff. I don't know if much catches your attention. We're, talking about who's going to be on the MMG tour, and we write those announcements, mm-hmm. and then they have to be scheduled. When are they going to play? Oh, wait a minute, we played that one yesterday morning at 11:15. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's play it today at 12:15, so it doesn't hit exactly the same people. All this intricate little stuff that from the outside it seemed like who cares, but it makes a difference because we know how long the average person listens to the radio station, and we know other stations they listen to and all this kind of thing. And so we've got to design a strategy to hit as many of our listeners as possible with everything we're doing. Mm-hmm. And through that, we end up, oh, wow, a particular, you might, for instance, be cruising along the TV, just flipping through channels, and all of a sudden you hear, I don't know, it would be, maybe you hear that some particular artist you liked 5 or 6 or 7 years ago that hadn't had a hit in a while is going to be on some nighttime talk show or something. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, cool. You'll tune in and watch that, whereas maybe you wouldn't normally watch that show. Mm-hmm. And in the same kind of way, if we've got an interview coming up with somebody that we think is important, or if we've got a contest coming up and we want to tell people, like the MMG tickets, we got this deal with Rick Ross comes on and says Merry Christmas. Mm-hmm. Well, we had to get that recorded. Ross had to do it for us, and then we have to schedule how often we're going to run the contests. And if you run them at the same time every day, then some people never hear the contest who listen at other times and all that kind of thing. So, just putting all that stuff together in such a way it works, that people are interesting to participate, that those who aren't participating find it interesting to listen to. We have to think all that through and try to make it work, Is that a short enough answer to your long question?